Hello, welcome to Common Censored. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes the end of the world.
And sometimes the end of the world, and that voice is Eleanor Goldfield.
Hi.
And I'm Lee Camp. Thanks for joining us again this week, coming to you from quarantine, which is an island right off of the Philippines. No, thank you all for joining us. I hope everybody's staying safe out there and not going too crazy, being locked up. I'm sure many people are, having a variety of rough times right now, but we're going to talk about some of that. We're going to talk about what people could be doing, what you maybe could be doing if you need help, if you want to help, all of those things. We're going to get into a lot of stuff in this show. About where we are now, because I think it's time to start philosophizing about the state of the world. I think for a while it was this has happened, and now the facts are less important than the the beliefs, the way forward. One fact is we have just hit 10,000 deaths in America. Another is that someone dies in less than every 2.5 minutes in New York City. So.
Yeah, so I think it's a good time to, if folks are out there thinking, oh, it's not that bad, it is. Stay the fuck home, stay away from people if you're going outside. And if you want to be flippant about this, you shouldn't take other people with you, literally. So if you personally feel kind of like, oh, it's not that bad and wherever I live, it's not really the point. This is the time for collective action to try and mitigate the worst that's really already here, but it's kind of like the issue with climate change. Even though it's already here, there are things that we can do to mitigate more pain and suffering, and that's what we should all be doing. So we all have an active role to play in that. So stop fucking going out and playing touch football with people. Stop fucking hugging people.
I was playing face touch football. Is that okay? That's what I was doing.
I mean, shit. In DC, I was walking the other day at a safe distance from other people.
Right,
and I walked past a park.
We actually have gone running, but it's like I do it away from everybody. I'm not near anybody.
Lee has just been running in between traffic, but people are in their cars, so that's fine. But yeah, I walked past a park the other day, and it was like fucking Lollapalooza in there. It was just like scores of people fucking wandering around, hugging each other, sweating on each other. I mean, it was just like you would never know that there was a global pandemic, and I just wanted to yell at all of them like some angry old Jewish lady. And I still might. I might start doing that soon.
In the karma department, Boris Johnson proudly, they've been playing the clip of him proudly saying, look, I don't, it doesn't bother me. I've been going to hospitals and greeting people. I'm going to keep shaking hands at hospitals. I'm sure some of these people have coronavirus, but I'm going to keep shaking hands. And
I would like to air high five whoever gave him coronavirus.
So then he got coronavirus and now he's in the intensive care. His wife has it as well, or fiance or something. That's not 10,000 deaths so far in the U.S. is not good. Obviously, this is a complete collapse of the government preparation that is supposed to happen for this kind of thing, the way it's supposed to work, and some of that is on Trump and his fucking idiocy, and he put Kushner in charge of some top secret secondary corona task force that has also been a catastrophe. I mean, it's just incompetence and nepotism on every level. However, a lot of this has been, and I said this on my latest Moment of Clarity video, a lot of this has been in the making for years and years. The collapse that we're seeing in the economy is because people were barely making ends meet to begin with. 50% of Americans couldn't get through $1,000 crisis, and here is that crisis. People don't have sick. We've gone through it week after week, I know, but people don't have sick leave. They don't have hardly any security in their jobs. They can be fired on the drop of a hat. So it's like this thing that is happening right now was the foundation was laid for years and years.
Well, right, and our system is both the creator and the catalyst for this, and this is something that just popped up in a recent interview that you did that I was eavesdropping on.
What? How dare you? Hold on. Someone heard my interviews? I always thought those were just between me and the person.
And you brought up this article that you wrote, I guess, a couple of years ago now, about a report that Goldman Sachs put out saying that curing diseases is bad for business, and that is such a powerful point to bring up right now, because literally you see how this system was never meant to address a pandemic. In fact, it was meant to create a pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was not meant to address one. That note that you're mentioning, analyst note, was not meant to be public. It was for their, top level investors. So we're talking millionaires at least, and they're basically telling them don't invest in curing diseases. Because there's less revenue stream, there's less profit to be made than investing in treatments that people get over and over again. That's where the money is. They also said in that note that curing diseases is bad for business because then the person isn't able to give the disease to others. Meaning it's not creating more revenue streams.
And so what do you say in that article? Like
Goldman Sachs has a profitable partnership with contagious diseases, which doesn't surprise me because Lloyd Blankfein is
a contagious disease,
vaguely like chlamydia. But no, but it does go to show that this system was not. It's not meant for health. It's not meant for happiness for the vast number of people. It is a feudal state and futile that has everyone suppressed. And so, but I do in the next few minutes, I want to discuss individually, what can we do? What can people do? Because obviously we can sit here and fucking bloviate with all of my logorrhea spraying out of my ears for an hour about the system writ large. The entire thing is, set up like this or set up like that. But I'm sure some people, at the end of the day, you think, what does that mean for me? What should I be doing? And there's the what should I be doing in the side of things, which is I have a lot of time now because either, yes, my job is not firing me and I'm working from home, but there's not a lot to do right now, so I have time. Or I've just been let go from my, bar job and I have to sit here. I'm not able to get another job. Is there something I can do? So there's a lot of what can I do going around. And I thought we'd talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to, and I have an article about mutual aid that's coming out via Roar soon, but
that's the outlet, ROAR, not she's gonna roar it out.
No, but I want to start with this quote because it's such a beautiful way of looking at this, and I know that it might seem like kind of morbid to look for silver lining in a morgue, but but I mean, but honestly, I think that
many
of the
caskets are silver, right?
the refrigerators are.
Oh, okay.
Not right. If you're buried in a silver casket, holy shit. But yeah, so I think that this is something that we need to do, not only for our own sanity or, what's left of it, depending on who we're talking about here, but also in terms of looking to the future and how we are going to weather this very unique storm. Because unlike other mutual aid efforts that you see in play after a hurricane or something, this is like a hurricane that doesn't have an end date. And unlike other mutual aid efforts, the mutual aid is happening during the storm, which is not something that you usually see either. It's usually afterwards. So this is a very unique time for mutual aid. It's a very unique time for our system. And as Arundhati Roy, who's the Indian author, put it in a recent article, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. Nothing could be worse than a return to normality. We can choose to walk through this portal, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. And I think that is I mean, it's a very eloquent and poetic way of putting it, but that's literally where we're at. If you look historically, and she goes through some other examples, and other writers have also in recent days pointed out what has happened to the world after a pandemic. And so I think that this is a very powerful time historically. And the question then is, through this portal, what are we dragging with us? Are we going to let the Pied Piper beckon us back to like their normality, which, as you know, Lee and I just pointed out, is what birthed this fucking crisis in the first place? Or are we going to walk through that portal to something new? And in so doing, let mutual aid really be the foundation for that new future.
Right. I can't remember, was it Margaret Kimberly that's said, and maybe this is an old quote, I don't know whether this was her or not, but that said, we can't go back to normal. Normal was the problem. Mm-hmm. And I think your quote definitely speaks to that. But I will say that, like, psychologically, we can say that all day long, but it is tough for people initially, and I don't want to act like I'm some kind of inhuman cyborg. I also have these feelings when shit gets fucked up in one way or another, to think, how can we get back to how it was before shit was so crazy? And even if that was fucked up in its ways, at least we'd be back to quote unquote, normal, the regular. And so it is tough to fight past that. And my father, who's a psychoanalyst, has also said that, like, there's this tendency of the masses, but I guess that goes for individuals, to regress during these times. And you have this moment, and we actually talked a little about it, although maybe not in these terms, last week. We talked about Cuomo and said there's this desire to, like, who's the daddy who's going to rescue me? Well, there is this sense of, like, where am I going to find security? Where am I going to, whatever it is, I just want to push everything out and be back in my little cocoon of happiness. And so it's very tough to remind yourself that these terrible times, and they are terrible in a lot of ways, are actually the times where something new can be brought through this portal.
Well, and I also think, and we're sitting here on a sunny day recording this, and I'm in a relatively good mood. And I think that it's important to note it's okay to feel shitty.
My fleshlight also came in the mail, so I got a lot going on.
That's why you have such a grin on your face. And you're not wearing any pants. I think, like, you see all of these, like, supposedly inspirational bullshit memes on social media being like, take this time to learn a musical instrument and search yourself or whatever.
Oh my
the
God.
fuck.
Can we talk for a moment that there's a guy trying to learn tuba?
Oh God, yes.
Outside the window here for the past, like, 4 weeks. But
I'd like to plead with people to not learn the tuba during this time, please.
And he, like, started on, like, the first day of quarantine, and it clearly never picked up. I mean, I'm no musician, but it never picked up a musical instrument. It was just like, bang, boom, bang. Like, it was awful. And now it's nearly as awful.
At first, I really thought that it was like an escaped animal from the zoo that was just, like, stepping on musical instruments.
And we do have a zoo near us, so
we do. That's
it actually could have been an escaped animal that was hit by a truck.
But, like, it's awful. So if you're gonna be learning a musical instrument, maybe like the triangle. But like, you're gonna see a lot of those, or you probably already have
the posts
that are like, take this time to do yoga or whatever the fuck. And it's like, that's great if you have the time and you want to do that.
I saw a post that said, if you're a tennis player, imagine,
that's right,
picture yourself playing tennis, and then went through all the details of how one would picture themselves playing tennis. And I was like, for fuck's sake, people.
It's like the shittiest. It's like VR, but without the VR part.
It's called an imagination.
So and that's cool if you want to sit there and, like, jack it and imagine yourself playing tennis. That's totally cool. Whatever you choose to do with your free time.
People do this at the same time?
I don't know. You tennis players
I guess
are weird.
The grip is the same.
Okay,
it's true.
I don't want to hold a tennis racket anymore. But yeah, and I think that it's important that, like, we recognize it's okay to feel shitty. It's okay to wallow in the bullshittery of the now and accept that this is some unprecedented shitstorm that we're all living through at the same time. And it's okay to have those moments of, However, it is also important to do something with those nihilistic moments. And this is where that sort of portal that Arundhati Roy is talking about, and this is where the mutual aid comes in, because basically, and I know that I've mentioned this before, but just to give like a little bit more insight, mutual aid is, in a sentence, it's the voluntary reciprocal exchange of resources and services for mutual benefit. So I'll give you an example. Here in DC, DC split up into wards, and we're in Ward 1, and so I've been working with Ward 1 mutual aid. And roughly like a week ago, I got a phone call from a guy who said, look, I'm basically out of food, and I walked several miles to try and find food at one of the food banks, but there wasn't anybody there. I can go without food, but I'm worried about my kids. And so what DC Mutual Aid then did is I, got on the Signal thread with folks, and I'm like, hey, look, this is the situation. I'm going to go ahead and do like an emergency run. And right there's a difference between mutual aid and charity, right? Because in charity organizations, if you've ever been part of one, you got to get the sign off from the person who knows the person who knows the other person, and then you have to go to this person to get the paper that says with the right letterhead and the bolt. But in mutual aid, it's all about like, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to actualize it. I'm going to check with folks to see if it's something that we want to actualize, and then I'm just going to fucking do it. So I just went on a run, got reimbursed through our monetary means, and then got this man some food. And when I was there, we were talking at a distance of more than 6 feet. Everyone calm down. We were talking.
Was it like a Romeo and Juliet? Was he up on a balcony? Or?
No. There was no weirdness like that. It was just a totally neighborly hangout.
Wherefore art thou groceries?
Which that wouldn't actually work, because wherefore actually means why. So it would be, why are you groceries?
All right, you Shakespeare nerd.
But so we talked, and we talked about his kids. He, asked me about my bike because I was biking. He offered me some input on how to keep my bike chain from slipping, and I reminded him of our, Ward 1 hotline, and he said, hey, if you need any help with your bike, I'd be happy to work on it. Don't lose my number. That's an example of mutual aid. I now wouldn't have to pay for someone to look at my bike because he says he's happy to do it. He doesn't have to pay for groceries because our mutual aid network is getting groceries out to people who need them and can't pay for them. That's an example of mutual aid. There's no hierarchy. There's no like pity. Charity pities, whereas mutual aid understands. Charity really separates people, and mutual aid connects them. If you've ever volunteered at a soup kitchen, for instance, they're like, don't share any personal information with the people that you're serving, and it's very much like
there
separation
is some good done at
between,
a soup kitchen.
it's like you're not the people that you're serving, and they are not you. There's a very distinct kind of barrier, but mutual aid gets rid of those barriers because the idea is you are part of your community. You are actually serving yourself by serving your community because you are part of your community. These people are part of you. That's
I agree with all that.
I
agree with all that. I don't know that every soup kitchen is awful, though.
I didn't say every soup kitchen is awful.
Oh, okay. But yes, it is the community helping itself, and we all benefit when people have food in our community.
Well, and it's also
no one wins because someone half a mile away their kids are starving. Do a lot of people do a little dance and go, "Yay, capitalism! I'm winning it and you're losing it."
Some people do. But the reason that I'm bringing this up, the reason I'm bringing up that story, is not because I'm not doing what the Democrats do. Like, here's a feel good story. That's just an example. And as a friend of mine who does mutual aid in Tampa put, there are a million paths and iterations of mutual aid. Mutual aid is not one transaction. It is not one example. It's folks in St. Louis that are making sure that they're building hand washing stations for the unhoused community and making sure that there are no touch thermometers so that they can get people some medical attention.
I have noticed the even during the stay at home order, the homeless have refused to stay home, and it's really pissing me off. They're still out there. They're on sidewalks and
I
things, and
know.
I'm like, guys, go home. And they just look at me, and I find it really offensive. I don't know why they're out there.
But yeah, so this is the reason that I bring this up is that mutual aid is everything that capitalism is not. It is literally looking out for people and working with people. It is the concept that every human has basic human rights, regardless of whether they have a bank account or the right papers. That they have a right to these basic human needs that we all have, and that we as community members should make sure that our community has those needs met. That is the basic concept, and that's why it's so powerful and efficient as compared to the system, and that's why we're seeing it be so powerful at this particular time, and that's why I feel that it is not only the answer to what we're going through right now, but it is the foundation for what we can build beyond that portal. Or through that portal.
And speaking of that, this kind of larger viewpoint that you're talking about, and I heard this in a Chris Hedges interview, but I know he's not the first to talk about it, is about the indigenous belief that no one eats unless everyone eats, and no one gets shelter unless everyone gets shelter in the community. And he makes the point, I'm sure historians have made this before, that the largest threat, perhaps, to American imperialism, white people imperialism, when we came to this country, was not just the, we need to get the native population out of here so we can steal the land and the water and the resources and the trees and all of that stuff, but the idea of this kind of communal living where you make sure everyone is taken care of went completely at odds with a view of slavery or feudalism or whichever, that they were trying to create in the New World. It just didn't fit. And so they really had to stop that idea. They had to stamp out that idea. And I think now is the time to kind of reinstate that and remind people that there's a different way to live. There's a different way to formulate our society, to structuralize it. And it should be that no one eats unless everyone eats, and no one gets shelter unless everyone does.
Well,
there's no reason that we can't be living. We live in a post-scarcity world. Mm-hmm. It's all here. There's no reason that someone should be, hoarding 1,000 cans of soup while one door away a guy can't find one.
Right, and I think, you bring up history, and I think it's also important to note that mutual aid has existed under so many different banners and names and iterations on this soil, the so-called United States, since even before capitalism and colonialism bashed through, in fact, a plague. So mutual aid is nothing new. What makes mutual aid so powerful is that it's fluid, and it's, as opposed to flimsy. It moves and changes and transforms with the people that are a part of it. So, and that's what also makes mutual aid really speak to this sort of non-hierarchical situation. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The mutual aid that exists here in D.C. is not like the mutual aid that exists in, Seattle, Washington, for instance.
Oh, God, why would you? Those people. No, but I was going to say, so you spoke about the non-hierarchical. Does the way it's set up help fortify it against someone coming in and trying to really run the show in their way? And obviously, if an authority or even just some fucking asshole wanted to upend the thing, it's difficult for them to come in and say, no, this is how it's done.
It is harder. I mean, it's not to say that it's never happened. A lot of our movements have been co-opted by state agents. So I think that, these are things that we talk about in our mutual aid groups. How do we apply security culture, which for those folks who aren't familiar, it's literally what it sounds like. It's the culture of staying safe and secure while at the same time, opening up your movement and space to new ideas and new people. How do we do that? And also, as Scott Crow, the anarchist writer and organizer, has said to me once, after I was dealing with an infiltrator, he's like, Eleanor, you have to understand, it's not a matter of if you're going to get infiltrated. It's a matter of when. And then how do you deal with it? You know, it really is like a storm, like a hurricane. It's like, it's not a matter of if this shit's going to go down, but how do we deal with it? How do we fortify ourselves and our groups to deal with this when it comes in? So, you know, what kind of security questions are we asking people when we vet them to be part of our groups? You know, what tiers can people be involved in? So if we know that somebody's definitely vetted, okay, you can be part of this group that has the most access to information. If we're not quite sure, here, you can go do a grocery run where you buy a bunch of groceries, because you don't really have anybody's personal information. You don't really know that much, but you can still assist.
Right.
And then as time goes on, we get to know you better. We, you know, check your social media pages. We see who you might work for, like if you work for Boeing or something, you know, like basically like how do we allow folks to come in while also acknowledging that the state is always trying to crack down on these things, and that's not something that's stopped now, you know, even. And I think we mentioned this last week too. There are bills that are being passed that restrict protest, which is of course part of restricting organizing and the ability for people to come together like we are now and see how we can exist outside the confines of the state, because that's the real threat, right? And historians have pointed this out with regards to like the Black Panther Party. The fact that they were walking around with shotguns is not really the big issue. The fact is that they were feeding the people, and through feeding the people, they were engaging the people in self-sufficiency and self-determination and autonomy, and saying, look, you don't need these literal slave drivers. You don't need this sick system to survive. We can survive in our communities on our own. And that is super fucking dangerous. That is why they targeted the Black Panthers, not because they were walking around in fucking black berets. And that's the same thing with mutual aid networks. We're a threat to the system because we prove that the system is unnecessary. And not only is it unnecessary, but it is oppressive and it is destructive. And we represent what could be done of, for, and by the people, which ironically is a concept that the U.S. has never actually intended to implement. But we represent that idea in action. We are solidarity in action. And we are actually dealing with and assessing people's needs in real time and coming up with answers in real time. And that is something that the state has never had any interest in doing, even though it has the power over and over and over again to do it. So that's the real threat here. We're proving that the system is unnecessary and grotesquely so.
Yeah, and another point that I feel like is being learned, is being processed by so many people right now, because let's face it, people's memory, the country's memory lasts about 30 seconds. So the fact that this lesson has been learned in the past doesn't mean that it's still known.
Sure.
That lesson is that the workers are the ones that keep things running, like the average workers, not the CEOs, not the board members. The board cannot show up to work, and guess what? The systems keep running. The stores are still stocked. But if the if the truck carrying the goods doesn't show up, or the people don't put them on the shelves, then it doesn't keep running. It doesn't keep going. And yet the board is paid 1,000 times what the average worker is. So the question is how to continue to get people to learn that lesson, and how to keep that lesson in people's minds as we go forward. I think one way to really cement it right now is in the solidarity with striking workers and, getting them the demands that they need right now. But yeah, it's how to move that forward.
Yeah, well, and I think and folks might hate this response, but this is something that a lot of folks have pointed out, is that there isn't an answer. These aren't rhetorical questions like, how do we do this? But there isn't an answer. There are many answers. And I think that this is part of the problem, is that we look at the so-called United States and think, oh, there has to be a U.S. answer to this question. No, there doesn't. There are so many different answers, and that's the powerful part, and that's the important part to recognize, because
But our answer is number one. Number one answer.
But if you're sitting and listening to this in Tampa, Florida, you're
referencing Tampa a lot.
It's because I've been talking to my friend who is doing mutual aid in Tampa.
We have 7 listeners in Tampa.
I'm sorry.
Celebrating.
Fucking Waco, Texas.
Wow. Had to go there, huh? All right.
You started it. Okay, so if you're in bumfuck Missouri, because I'm sure that's an actual place in Missouri. If you're in bumfuck
There was just
Missouri,
a mass shooting in bumfuck, and I'm really upset that you brought that up.
well, that's their problem. Why were they congregating? There shouldn't be a mass anything right now.
Because they wanted to enjoy a good bumfuck.
Wow. So wherever you are, if you're listening to this in Los Angeles, your needs, the needs of your community, and the structure of your community is completely different than the folks in Brooklyn, right? Than the folks in New Orleans, right? All of these needs are different, and that's important. And it's I know it's frustrating because people are like, I want a blueprint, I want a how-to, like I'm building a fucking IKEA bed. Just show me which fucking Allen's wrench goes where, and I'll build it, and it will work, and we'll fix this. But it's not, unfortunately, that is unrealistic, and it doesn't make any sense. And that's why we're, at this moment, there are threads out there of national organizers, and we're trying to figure out, okay, this is what we're doing, and we're going to try and scale it up in this way. Okay, cool. We're scaling this up in this way. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to connect, but it means that the structures are going to look different. And I can actually include this in the show notes. There's a description of how things work in Rojava, which for folks who aren't familiar, I know we've mentioned on the show before, but Rojava is in northern Syria, in Kurdistan, and and they basically have what's called democratic confederalism, but it's the idea that there's no monarch, there's no president, and the people that have the most say are these smaller neighborhood units. And that's how they structure it, so that everybody is so engaged because everybody is so necessary, because people have to be engaged with what's happening on their block. And that is incredibly important to decide what's going on in the larger Kurdistan. And it all comes down to those neighborhood pods or areas. So I can include that in the show notes, but it's a really fascinating way of structuring it, and it's basically built on this principle that there is no one size fits all. And I just pulled it up here, and again I'll share this, but the base is the commune, then the second level is the village's people's council, the district people's council, and then the people's council of West Kurdistan. And you have representatives from each of those to go up to the very top that basically say, these are the needs of our specific neighborhood, these are the needs of our specific constituents, and those are unique needs. How are we going to, as the larger entity, how are we going to address these? How are we going to make sure that people don't feel unheard or disrespected? And this is how they've built that to ensure, and of course people might be like, well, that's a fucking war zone. Yeah, but that's not their fault. That's our fault. The US, that is. But they've been able to create a united front against ISIS. And ISIS, Daesh, against an entity that these larger empires like the US have not been able to beat back. And when asked about it, these, Kurdish fighters have pointed out, the reason isn't because we had more firepower than the United States. The reason is because we knew where every gun was. We knew where every person lived. We knew that grandma over there had really good sniper capabilities. We knew that person's balcony over there was a great spot to do this. They are so well invested in their communities that they know everything about each other and each other's needs, and who's good at what and who can help with
I would argue that I do know that the people over there have great key lime pie. The people on that side make a mean whiskey sour. Oh. So I am collecting information about the community.
You are definitely on craft services.
I don't know if I could defend us from much, but
I don't know. I think a lot of DC folks on whiskey sours could
do some damage.
Could break some shit.
Well, no, you're making all great points, and something I think we're going to have to think about or continue to fight for is that as when the systems are kind of breaking down like this, and I don't want to act like it's going to be end of days, everyone in the streets with guns trying to make sure that their dog doesn't get eaten for dinner by the neighbors or whatever anytime soon, but I think that there is a fight of ideology, and that happens now, but maybe it becomes more defined and even broader. And in that fight for ideology, there are going to be those people in our society who are basically the opposite of you and me, and probably most of the people listening, who say, now is the time for us to you fucking get your guns and you get off my fucking property, and I'm gonna have all my food and maybe take all of your food that you have, and fuck you, man. And there's gonna be those people, and I think we're gonna have to continue to stand up for each other and stand up for the oppressed, because the oppressed will be ever more oppressed in such a situation, or if stuff were to get even worse. I think
sure, I think that's part of like there's not one size fits all approach, and I think that you're not going to have everyone with you, and you don't want everyone with you, right? You don't want the fascist who's like, I don't think black people should exist. You don't want that person on your team.
But you're like, do you make a key lime pie though? You're not listening to me.
So I think like we have to accept that as organizers, or whatever you want to call yourself, neighbor. We have to accept that not everyone is going to be on board with this, and that's part of our conversations. That's part of our how we stay safe conversations, and that's obviously the how we organize conversation as well. And I think that these are again conversations that people are having in their communities, and that they need to. These conversations need to scale up and talk about and really start talking about that portal again, like that walk through that portal, so that because that walkthrough is not happening yet. We're in the thick of this bullshit for quite some time, but these questions need to be discussed now. These ideas need to be, hashed out and hammered out amongst people that are doing this kind of work now.
Ahead of time. Much like the coronavirus, if you don't prepare beforehand, you end up fucked.
Yeah.
Back to workers just for a second before we move on. I think that those of you out there who are average workers, which I think most of us are in some regard, I think that, like you're saying, these conversations need to be had, and workers should start talking to each other about the power they have in the system. And I know that in some places you can be worried that, if you're the person that starts talking about how workers have any power whatsoever, that you can end up being the person who's fired for it if it gets back to management or whatever. But, maybe in certain areas, that's a risk that's worth taking to create large-scale change, I don't want to speak for anyone. I know it's a place of privilege to say that doing anything is worth risking your job if you need your job. But I think standing up for other work, especially right now, you look at some of these like warehouses, the Walmart warehouses or the Amazon warehouses, and it's going to take workers standing up for those workers who are at the greatest risk, those who are can't keep up with the rate they're making them run around, and the not taking security measures against the virus, and telling them they have no time off. And it's going to take those who are able to handle that stuff standing up for the oppressed, and in order to create large-scale change. But I think that if you want to think a positive could come out of this chaos and this crisis, it is that solidarity, is that understanding of being in it together in a way that your mainstream media, your corporate media will never tell you. Sure, they'll say, oh, we're in this together at the end of every broadcast nowadays, but they will never say that the workers need to start standing together against the ruling elite and need to understand that we really have the power. We just don't often exert it.
Well, and I think, and of course, this is why, workplace organizing, and I say workplace, even though I know we're not at workplaces, most of us, workplace organizing is so powerful because it's not coming from a place of privilege. It's your colleagues and the folks that you work next to that are talking about this. So you all have the same amount to lose. And I think that I remember hearing this quote in Coal Country. I don't remember if it was attributed to Mother Jones or if it was just somebody who said it. But when the pain of the things staying the same is greater than the fear of what might happen, then you act. And I think that's where we're at, right?
Mm-hmm.
The pain of things staying the same, or even more so going back, is great. It's too great. And I think that even if you're not feeling that hit right now, even if you don't, even if somehow you make it out of this unscathed relatively, the vast majority of people haven't and won't, and that amount of pain is already greater from what I've seen, at least in DC, and I know that it's similar around the country. That pain is already greater than the fear of what might happen if you stand up and say, you know what, fuck you. We are not going back to your normal. We are not going to go back to the point where we are carrying the weight of this dilapidated and oppressive system on our fucking shoulders. We can see clearly that we are what makes this shit run. And why are we spending our life, our hours creating wealth for you and keeping this dying system alive as opposed to building something powerful that works for us? And so I think that's like this is the power of the right now. And I think, like, again, that what's so unique about this is that, like, for folks that have done mutual aid before, you'll know, oh, well, I was doing it in this part where that hurricane hit or where that flood hit. And it's very localized, right? And then, if people go 100 miles outside the city, they're like, oh, nothing's wrong. Everything's chill.
Or sometimes 3 miles.
Right, whatever. But, like, what makes now so powerful is that we're not just saying, oh, wow, look, it's so fucked up in Florida and look at how poorly Florida is dealing with it. It's like, look how fucked up all of this is, and look how poorly the entire system is dealing with it, and how we're all suffering under that absolute designed bullshittery, that designed oppression. And so I think, like, that's what makes this so powerful, is that kind of solidarity is not localized anymore. It is so absolutely spread out. And I think that we have to take charge of this moment. We have to really, like, look at that portal and be like, I'm not carrying your bullshit through this door.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm putting down the baggage of late stage capitalism, and I am walking through that fucking door with something else.
Yeah, it's funny because you're talking about realizing that we're all suffering in this together, some more than others, but at least we understand it's each of our communities. And I think what has stopped us from standing up before, one thing that has stopped many of us, is we've all been so successfully atomized and separated into our little boxes of isolation that smell of fresh paint and cut grass that, finding whatever sedative of reality TV we can each night, pumped into our eye holes to numb our brains to the point that we don't actually think about the larger picture. We really have succeeded in separating ourselves. I mean, I'm using the word succeeded in a sarcastic way, but in the grand scheme of things, it really is a brilliant way to kind of enslave everybody within their boxes of relative comfort, at least slight comfort, as long as they don't look deeper into themselves and deeper into the reality of our existence as humans. And it really takes something severe to knock us out of that, and really accept that the life we thought we were living were the shadows cast on the wall of the cave.
Well, yeah, and nice Plato's cave reference.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and I think that you brought up another good point, which is the comfort issue, and I think that the idea that just think about anything. Think about like whether you're trying to get more fit, and so you start doing a workout program. That's not comfortable. That's fucking hard. You get sore. You sweaty and gross, and or if you're ending a relationship because it's not a healthy one. That's hard. That's uncomfortable. Progress is never comfortable. Evolution is never comfortable. And I think actually one of the first clips that I ever saw of you, Lee, was I don't know if it was Occupy Wall Street, but you were interviewing some guy who had been like on a hunger strike or something, and he said that comfort is the like antithesis of progress or something, and I was like, wow, that's such a good way and a succinct way of putting it.
It always stuck with me, and I'm sorry I don't. Oh, his name was Tariq something. I'm sorry I don't remember his full name, but he was a veteran, and it's funny that line stuck with both of us because I don't remember anything else he said through the whole interview. I mean, it was only a 5-minute interview. I don't want to act like I talked to him for an hour. Only a 5-minute interview. It was with Veterans for Peace, and he was walking we were all marching in New York, and he said, something like comfort is the antithesis of change, and once you become comfortable, you stop fighting for anything better in a larger scale because you yourself are comfortable. And it's so true. And I think about that often, that line, and how I want to be more like him, and know that I'm continuing to fight for change in the largest way I can, whether I have a job or I have an apartment or I can afford a drink at a bar when other people can't.
Right. And I think that, and again, like, this is not to say, like, you can never watch Netflix again because that makes you too comfortable. This is about, like, the larger sort of overarching concept of our lives. Are we sitting back and being like, other people have got this, activism thing down, so I'm just going to sit here and watch it happen? Or, whatever the case may be, getting comfortable is basically kind of leaning back into a perpetual status quo. It's saying it's passively supporting whatever's going on. And it doesn't matter where the fuck you are on the political spectrum, but nobody is looking at this now and being like, yep, solid, great, whatever it is, this is working well. And so
for their individual lives, some people are.
Well, no, but I mean like the situation.
Right,
Nobody's looking
the
at
larger situation, right.
And so I think that, and this brings me to another point. I've been seeing a lot of posts online that are like, hey, I'm really bored. This is getting so boring. Da 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 da. And I'm going to admit that I have some anger issues, but it makes me so fucking angry because it's like, hey, I know what cures boredom. Doing something useful.
Go help people.
Helping your community. And again, like, this isn't charity. By helping your community, you're helping yourself because you are engaging in the community so that you can be part of the community that does better as a whole. Like, you can be part of that, like, that community that decides as a unit, we are going to fucking do urban gardening, fuck Monsanto, or whatever. Like, you actually do better for yourself. So even if you're just a selfish asshole, helping each other in a mutual aid perspective helps you too. So it's like, I get so angry when I see people are like, I'm bored. And here's the thing, mutual aid isn't all about like going out and doing grocery runs. Like, a lot of mutual aid is doing like check-ins with people, like, hey, this person is a senior and they live alone, and they just want someone to talk to a couple of times a week.
I read a children's book to a bumblebee. Does that count as mutual aid?
I really hope someone took a picture of that because I want that.
I'm trying to help my community as best I can, and I know the bees need help. No, but speaking of check-ins, like, that is, people can even help their friends. That is doing something. Obviously, I think we all hope we'll go and do larger things as a whole. But calling friends that are having a rough time and checking in with them, that is also helping your community.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you're quarantining, if you're symptomatic or whatever, then you can also do things like intake, which is, in mutual aid sense, it's like taking requests from a hotline, logging them into a spreadsheet so that, grocery runners or things like that know what people need. So there are there are thousands, if not millions of ways to do mutual aid. There isn't one way. So, you might be sitting in a place where you're like, wow, here's this other remote way that I can help my community without actually having to leave my home. Do it. Fucking do it. And that's the other thing with mutual aid, is that mutual aid is not about waiting for permission to do something. Mutual aid is about doing it. So you start I'm going to go do this emergency grocery run for a neighbor because I heard they were out of food. No one needs to give you permission for that. You just do it because it is a good idea. and so I think that that's the other thing, is that we're programmed to look for somebody, like you mentioned with the Cuomo, where's daddy type of thing. Yeah. We don't need a leader in this sense. We need each other. And this is not, I'm not saying we're all going to get on board with this leaderless movement thing. You guys can structure your mutual aid however you really want and have point people or point persons or whatever. But the idea being that the authorities that exist in our system, these capitalist authorities, do not need to give us permission to help ourselves, to help each other. Uh-huh. That is a bullshit construct that's been programmed into us so that we don't help ourselves and each other.
And they try and shut it down. They try and shut it down when it gets going. That's why you see, before this virus, you've seen areas of the country making feeding the homeless illegal, making housing the homeless illegal, destroying tiny homes built for the homeless. You've seen this in many places. I know one of the ones that got the most coverage was down in, I believe it was Tampa, Florida. No, somewhere in Florida.
I think it was Orlando.
Yeah, somewhere in Florida. But literally handcuffing people for serving beans to fellow citizens.
Yeah, and I think at one point they handcuffed a 95-year-old.
Well, he was famous for doing this, right, for feeding people. He'd been doing it for years and years, and he was 95, and I can't remember his name, but they literally said, put the plate down, and handcuffed him. And it's not the act of feeding them that they're upset about. The real reason is the idea that we can help ourselves. That
the
community,
threat of a good example.
Yeah, the threat of a good example of of feeding people, of giving them food for free, of giving clothes for free, of housing them in an unofficial way. That is really dangerous to the larger systemic beliefs of our late stage capitalism, that you need to fight every minute in often a job you hate in order to house yourself and clothe yourself. And if you don't, you will end up on the streets being pissed on. And the ruling system wants those people out on the sidewalks to demonstrate to you, as George Carlin said, to scare the fuck out of the middle class, to scare the fuck out of you that you're going to be there. So yeah, it really is. It challenges the whole belief system if that is everywhere. If everywhere you go, you saw, instead of the tiny libraries that are nice to see, I like that they exist, if you saw tiny food pantries, and I know I saw an article about these actually being in some city, but I don't know whether they probably found a reason to shut them down.
I think I saw there were some in Vancouver, which figures because Vancouver is very...
But the tiny food pantries where come one, come all, take all the food you want if you need it. And, the people have started creating those. And then, of course, in some cities, they're like, well, it brings rats. Hey, you know what else brings rats? Having a fucking city, all right?
Right.
They're here anyway.
And actually, rats apparently make great pets. They're apparently very intelligent.
Oh, God.
No, I'm serious. See, my thing is I just can't with the tail.
By doing this, you are making people write off everything else you've said.
I just can't with the tail. If I could put a little rug on the tail, wrap it in a little tiny rug, I'd be totally down with the rat. But I just can't with that tail. And apparently possums are also very good.
Tiny rug on the tail.
Possums are they keep your yard free of pests, and they're also very intelligent and cool. But again, can't with the tail. So if I could just wrap these fucking tails in something, I would have a menagerie.
Right. You heard it here.
Rodents.
You heard it here first. Eleanor would like the whole community to get together and help each other. And also, if you see her wielding a bloody axe, chasing possums around the neighborhood, don't worry. She's just chopping off their tails.
No, I
She's
said
just
wrap them in a rug.
Chopping off their tails.
No,
but
I
then
would
she's going to
never.
deep fry and feed those tails to the hungry.
Okay,
So-
you are fucked. Okay. I'm going, you know what? There's a list of mental health resources that the Mutual Aid Network has put out. I'm going to send all of those
just
to
going
you.
off what you were putting down.
I've never said anything about chopping off tails, you morbid fuck. No.
All right, before we wrap up, I want to go through one more idea that I think is growing. Let's say going viral, one might say,
Too soon.
like a virus
Too soon.
that is inserting itself into people's brain boxes.
Wait, like those amoeba? Brain amoebas?
The idea, yeah, you can also get this for one from a neti pot as well.
No, neti pots are good. Just don't use fucking what is it?
Neti pots cause brain parasites.
No, they don't. Don't use what is it
Tap
called?
water.
Tap water. Thank you. I was about to say dishwater.
Don't use dishwater. Yeah, don't do that either. No, I think that many of the things we're talking about, if they were to continue to catch on, could spell an evolution past capitalism into something better. Now, granted, it would take a long time. I assume it doesn't happen overnight. But and I also think that the beliefs that people are gaining through this crisis could help spell the end of the American empire. Now, that doesn't mean I want the end of people who live in America to have good lives. I want everyone to have good lives. But the American empire
is why people don't.
Is partially why people don't. And the idea that America should have 1,000 bases around the world, should run everybody else's lives, should upend every country that wants to, have socialism or nationalize their oil fields or whatever the fuck they want to do with their country. The idea that America should get in there and make all the choices for them and upend them and destroy them. That is the American empire, and it's been going on for a long time. The slave ships were not a recent thing, and yet we're still going on this concept that we rule the world in a way, and that these are resources we can steal from other places. And there's been some good news on this front in that certain countries, many of them are, kind of looking past toxic nationalism, and that we need to join together in order to fight this virus and this pandemic. And the U.S. is not doing that. The U.S. is doing the opposite of that largely. We're not helping other countries. We're, stealing from other countries.
Yeah.
We're fighting against the idea of like Cuban doctors going to Italy to help, and Chinese doctors and scientists helping. And if you want to talk about how they've bypassed the Iranian sanctions that we have there.
Sure. So basically, Britain, France, and Germany have bypassed U.S. sanctions to provide Iran with medical aid. This is a story that came out of The Telegraph, which is a British publication. So for folks that aren't aware, Iran has been hit incredibly hard by coronavirus. And of course, because of sanctions, they don't have access to basic medical needs that they would otherwise. And so, and this is not like a total bypass. This isn't basically Europe saying fuck you to the US, which they should have a long time ago. And I hope that they fucking do. But Britain, France, and Germany has bypassed the U.S. sanctions, and a financial system called Instex was used for the first time in order to send medical support to Iran. And this
basically
is
they had to get outside of the central banking system,
right? So it's and I know less than shit about financial systems.
You
and
said the word Instex correctly.
And this is a complex financial system that bypasses U.S. sanctions. So
can you detail the algorithm for us?
There's a lot of ones and zeros. But basically, this is a powerful and important move, and this is something that we should be seeing a lot more of. And so if you live in any of these countries, or fuck it, if you even don't, you should definitely let representatives know, let people know that this is what needs to happen. Right now, there are a few different representatives in our Congress. I think there was like a letter that was signed on by like something like a dozen people in our Congress that said that the U.S. needs to lift sanctions in order to not be horrific genocidal pieces of shit. And that is something that is only going to be bolstered by people, putting the word out there and saying that they demand this sort of action. So, make sure that you let people know that this is the kind of shit that you want to see happen.
Yeah, and it's a big step because for so long, I mean, the U.S. has sanctions on so many countries. It's like over 30-some sanctions, whereas other countries usually have zero. There's a few countries with one sanction on someone, but the U.S. just throws them around, and it is economic war, and it destroys lives. And they've been able to show that 40,000 people have died in Venezuela over the past couple of years.
That's a low estimate.
From U.S. sanctions on them. So this is war. It does kill innocent civilians. It kills largely those who have more difficulty defending themselves, like babies and elderly, and those who are infirmed. So it really is disgusting, and rather than give it a break, we are amping them up. We're going after Venezuela harder than ever before, going after Iran, and Britain, France, and Germany have found a way to bypass the financial regulations so that hopefully they can help Iran to some extent get through this virus.
And I think that just wrapping up here, this proves that where there's a will, there's a way. There's a way around U.S. sanctions. There's a way around U.S. imperialism for people, not people, but for nations who want to stand up and say, you know what, fuck this. You can do it. You just have to have the fucking willpower. And we, as people, particularly here in the United States, these children of empire, we have a tremendous role in pushing, basically in toppling the largest empire that the world has ever seen. That's our job. And I think that we need to take that very seriously because, again, this is kind of a mutual aid thing. This is not only about helping people in the countries that are attacked by U.S. empire. U.S. imperialism is a home game. And Lee and I have both talked about that, how U.S. imperialism comes home and what that looks like. So this is about helping your communities again, in dismantling this empire and rattling those thrones. So it's very important that we recognize that these things are possible. We can make it around this. We can make it through this. We just have to use these tenets of mutual aid and, anti-imperialism, anti-racism, and those kind of concepts.
And a couple of quick things before you hang up on us. Don't hang up! Don't hang up! Can you tell them the websites to look at mutual aid and how they can either get help or get involved?
Yeah, so there a lot of mutual aid doesn't have like official websites, but you can go to, and I'll include this in the show notes, Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. They're a great
.org.
hub for, I think they're a great hub.
.org.
Okay. They're a great hub for mutual aid resources. You can also check out my website. I've got a list of resources on there as well, artkillingapathy.com, and just go to the blog, and there's a post called Love in the Time of Coronavirus. And I bet if you just like looked on Facebook, for instance, DC Mutual Aid has a Facebook page. I know that my friends in St. Louis have a Facebook page. So a lot of these places have Facebook pages, or they have an Instagram or something like that. So just do a little digging, and you should be able to find your local spot. But again, I will post a link where a lot of these cities have their information listed.
Few quick things. My stand-up comedy special is now free because I know many of you are struggling. You don't know when you're headed back to work. So no charge. LeeCampAmerican.com. Give you something to do for the next hour and a few minutes. You can watch my stand-up comedy special for the first time free. That's LeeCampAmerican.com. And if you feel you got like $1 or $2 of content out of this episode, please, you'll notice this show has no sponsors, no ads. It's promoted and supported by you, the listener. So patreon.com/commoncensored. Many of you have signed up in the past few weeks, and we can't thank you enough. I'm not kidding around when I say that you guys make this show possible. Patreon.com/commoncensored. Eleanor and I are going over there to do 10 to 15 more minutes of content. content. So we'd love for you to sign up and listen to those as well. Eleanor's new movie will be out in a bit at hardroadofhope.com. You can sign up to be on the email list for that, hardroadofhope.com. My book is 10% off, leecampbook.com, if you use the coupon code, the initials of the title, BPAPL, bullet points and punchlines. Use that coupon code, get 10% off. You can also get the digital version if you want to read it right now. Go get it right now. Also, Eleanor's website is artkillingapathy.com. We already told you about that a minute ago. And if you want to join our email list so that we can email you and let you know when every episode is out, that's you can text the word censored, like common censored. Text the word censored to 33777. Thank you so much. Keep fighting.
Act out.